What's up, my dear language learning masters? Well, welcome to Natural Languages and welcome to a brand new episode of the Language Input Podcast, in which, I'm going to address the most common questions and misconceptions when it comes to the language learning process. Okay, because I'm convinced, totally convinced, and my goal with my project is to help as many people as possible understand that we can all learn any language while enjoying the process every step of the way. That's right. That's the most important message I want to convey with my podcast and with my project as a whole. Yeah. And with that being said, and before getting started with today's topic, I also want to remind you to leave your comments down below and with your opinion on this specific topic. If you're listening to this episode on YouTube or a platform where you can leave your messages. All right, and yeah, once again, if you have any questions, any ideas, any suggestions for future episodes, I'll be grateful for that. And so don't be afraid to leave your comments down below as well, because you'll be giving me ideas for future episodes. And yeah, I really appreciate that. And I'll be able to help you out as well with your question or whatever it is. So yeah, thank you in advance for that. And yeah, with that being said, let's get into today's topic. And today I want to talk about language exchanges. Are they useful? If yes, what's the best way to use them, or what's the best way to approach them in order to maximize our language learning experience? All right. So yeah, that's today's topic. So let's get into it. And well, first of all, I do believe they can be extremely useful. I've used them, I've done them many times. I continue to use them in pretty much every single language I've learned or I'm learning, because they can be extremely useful. Okay, but I just want to talk about the way we approach it, or what the best way to approach it is, because like I said, they can be extremely useful, but I'm not sure we're using them in the most appropriate way. All right, and let me explain what I mean. Like most people, when you hear about language exchanges, most people think about just two people meeting, or live or online, or just an event in which if a specific person wants to learn Spanish and they're a native English speaker, they'll find a native Spanish speaker who wants to learn English. All right, and that's perfect. But what most people think about is, or most people's approach to it is, okay, let's speak for half an hour in English and for half an hour in Spanish, right? And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, that's a good idea. But especially when not if we're getting started with a language. If we're getting started with a language, we're gonna need classes or other resources. But when we're starting to be able to communicate, all right, so we can talk a little bit in the target language, but we're not that comfortable yet. It can be challenging to actually engage in a real-life conversation in that target language with a native speaker when you're not ready to start communicating the way you'd like to. All right. And what I'm suggesting here is, like I said, especially at the beginning, is that in that same specific situation, I think the best approach is for both of them to use their native languages. So in this example, the native Spanish speaker will use Spanish throughout the whole conversation, and the English native speaker will use English throughout the entire conversation. All right. Once again, we know comprehensible input is the key to the entire process. All right. So the first good news about that approach is we're going to be listening to our target language throughout the entire time. So if we're taking 1 hour into the process, we're going to be listening to our target language for an hour instead of half an hour. like in the previous idea or the previous approach. Okay, so that's already an advantage. And then, of course, this works for this approach and for any approach. Both participants need to adjust their speech or to model the speech in order for the other person to understand what they're saying. All right, but that's in any approach, not just what I'm talking about, but the half an hour approach, same thing, right? But the good thing about this idea is when both people are speaking in the native language, they know when it's their turn to speak, they're not going to have any problem to communicate or to build sentences or whatever you want to call it, right? And surprisingly enough, I'm just kidding. It's not surprising. Surprisingly enough, when you're gonna be able to perfectly communicate when it's your time to speak, you're not worried about building sentences in your mind ahead of time when the other person is speaking. Can you relate to that feeling, right? Like when you're communicating in a foreign language, especially when you're starting with the language, when you want to communicate, when the other person is speaking, many times we're just trying to build the next sentence we're gonna say in our head. And guess what? When we're thinking about the next sentence we're gonna say, we're not really paying attention to what the other person's saying. Isn't that right? And when you're not paying full attention to what the other person's saying, again, surprisingly enough, you tend not to understand as much, right? So the good part about this approach I'm talking about is because you're not worried about the part in which you're going to speak, you're actually going to pay more attention to the other person speaking. And like I said, surprisingly enough, just kidding, you're going to be able to understand even more than you thought. And, give it a try and let me know what happens, right? And the good thing about this approach is that you don't need to use your target language in order for the other person to see that you understand what he or she is saying. Why? Because, if one of the two participants is speaking about whatever, in their target language, okay, if the other person's response in his or her own native language makes sense, you can see he or she understood what the other person said, right? So you can perfectly keep the conversation going by both using their native languages, yeah, and understanding that what the other person saying makes sense, or sort of keeps the conversation going in a normal way. Hope it makes sense what I'm saying, okay? And this way, like I said, it's just so much. It's like you leave frustration behind when you use this approach, okay? And of course, I do understand that our ultimate goal is to be able to communicate in our target language, all right? So I'm not saying you need to do this forever, but believe me, give it a try, because at the very beginning, it's gonna be so helpful. Because you're not going to be worried about being able to communicate or not, because you're going to use your native language. And guess what? The fact that you can't communicate yet, as I've said over and over again, doesn't mean that you're not learning the language, or it doesn't mean that you're bad at languages, or whatever the misconception, all right? It just means you didn't get to the point yet. Simple, It's like the case of kids and their native languages when they're not ready to start speaking yet. All right, it doesn't mean they're not learning the language. They actually are, and you can tell. But they're just not ready to start communicating yet. Okay. So it's the same thing for us adults. So you're gonna take a lot of frustration out of the equation with that idea, and believe me, you'll see how rewarding it is to be able to engage in real life conversation with a native speaker, and being able to talk about pretty much anything you want, and plus, like I said at the beginning, what we really need in order to keep learning the language is to listen to the language and read, of course, so to get comprehensible input, all right? Obviously, the other person needs to adjust, like I said, if they need to speak a little bit slower or to use more gestures or, real life examples with with context, so the other person understands what you're saying. You need to adjust to the other person's needs, okay? but that works for any situation when speaking a foreign language, right? So yeah, believe me, give it a try, and you'll see how amazing it is. And I like firsthand, I can tell you how much it helped me, because I've done it with Portuguese, I've done it with Italian, I continue to do it with Polish. I actually did it with French when I started out, because I've talked about it many times, but my mom was a French teacher in college. And when I started realizing how the language process actually works, I told her to talk to me in French for, I don't know, like an hour a day or a specific time. And I will reply to her in Spanish, in our native language, right? And by my answers, I mean, if they made sense, my mind could see that I understood what she was saying, okay? And that helped me a lot, believe me, because I was getting started with French, so she adjusted to my needs, all right, in order for me to understand what she was saying. And it helped me a lot. So like I said, I've done it with French, I've done it with Italian, I've done it with Portuguese. I continue to do it with Polish, like I said. And once again, it doesn't mean, I've done it with English as well. It doesn't mean that you're gonna do that forever. No, you'll get to a point in which you can start being able to communicate naturally. You'll know that, okay? But it really, really helps you out at the beginning, believe me. And then, to wrap things up here, like the main message that I wanted to convey in this podcast is for you to give a try to this idea that I'm proposing here, okay? Because it's tremendously helpful. But language exchanges in general, where regardless of the approach, to me they're absolutely great because of they allow you to meet people from different countries, from different cultures, to talk about like different cultures or traditions of both your countries and so on, which is, I believe, one of the main reasons why we all learn languages, right? To be able to communicate with people in their own native languages and to get to know other cultures in a better way, right? Or to dive deeper into those cultures. At least that's why, I learn languages, or that's the main reason why I do it, okay? So, yeah, in general, if you haven't tried that yet, I strongly encourage you to give language exchanges a try. And if you don't feel comfortable using your target language yet, do it the way I told you, because it's extremely rewarding and extremely stress-free. You'll see that. And and like I said before, and like last thing here, I'm not telling you not to do like a traditional language exchange in which you both communicate in one language at a time. All right, that's totally fine, like I said, and that's our ultimate goal, as language learners. So keep doing it, because that's also an excellent idea. But I do believe using them this way that I presented today, especially when getting started, is a good way of taking some of the stress and the frustration out of the equation, okay? And it's gonna help you a lot, believe me. So yeah, like to sum things up, I believe language exchanges are an extremely useful tool in order to keep learning the language. Because especially one-on-one, because you both are gonna adjust to the other person's needs. You're gonna tailor your speech so the other person understands what you're saying, and they can keep the conversation going and so on. But yeah, so yeah, thank you for listening to today's episode, okay? And yeah, once again, like I said at the beginning, don't be afraid to share your opinion on this specific topic, on to share your opinion on, or to share your own experience, right? The way you're actually using language exchanges in your life, if you are. And again, any other question you may have concerning the language learning process, I'll be more than happy to answer them and help you out in the process. So yeah, don't hesitate to do that as well. And yeah, thank you. I wish you a good day, whatever you might be, my dear language learning master. And I see you in the next episode. Bye bye. Have a good day.